Now, before you even think about animating cameras inside of After Effects, you should really get comfortable with the thought of positioning your layers in 3D space. So that's what we're going to focus on in this video. If you notice our composition down here, our positioning layers composition, I have 4 layers. Now, none of these layers live in 3D space, but I have a vignette and a background black layer, so I just want layers 2 and 3 in 3D space. So let's go ahead and enable 3D for both of those layers. Now, what we're going to build is 2 sides to a box. And in order to have 2 sides to a box, I need to have more layers than this. So if you notice layer 3, I can turn the visibility off and on, and that takes up the entire composition space. And I want to have another layer just like this that I can position along this right edge and then rotate it around backwards as if there were another edge to a box. But before I do that, what I want to do is actually build some animation. Because when you position layers in 3D space, the animation will actually follow layers if you actually make the animation the child of the parent layer. Now, I know that may sound confusing, but just follow along with me here and you'll see exactly what I'm doing. First, we need to create our animation. I'm going to select layer 2, which is my logo layer, and I just want it to fly from behind the camera right into the scene where it currently sits. So we'll start by moving our current time indicator to frame 12, and then I'll press Option P or Alt P on Windows to create a position keyframe. Then we can move our current time indicator back to frame 0 and hold down the Shift key and scrub along the Z axis. I'll click and drag, not to the right because that moves it away. I'll drag it back to the left and drag until you see it just pass in front of the camera. So now, if I go ahead and press the spacebar to preview this, you can see it just loads up kind of a linear animation, which is sort of boring. So I'll press the spacebar and stop playback. Let's highlight both those keyframes and then press F9 on your keyboard to change those to an eased keyframe. Now, you could also right-click on either one of the keyframes, go to your keyframe assistant, and choose Easy Ease. All right. Now, with both of those keyframes selected, let's open up the graph editor, because now I want to draw a lasso around these 2 keyframes here in the graph editor, and I want this to move quickly and then slow down drastically as it lands. So let's grab this rightmost handle and drag it towards the left, or the beginning of the timeline, and just let go. So now, if we preview this animation, it's going to go and load up here. You can see it moves in much more quickly and it resolves, which I think is a much more dynamic animation. Congratulations, you've handled the initial animation. So let's press the spacebar to stop playback here for a second, and we'll get out of the graph editor. Now I want to go ahead and collapse layer 2 because I want to create another comp and have that same comp have this same logo animation applied to it. Since we've gone through the trouble of animating this layer in relation to layer 3, I want the new comps to have those relations. But before I do that, I need to make layer 2 the child of layer 3. This way, if I reposition layer 3 anywhere, layer 2 will follow. So let's go to the parent column. I'm going to click on the pick whip and point it at layer 3. So now layer 2 is the child of layer 3. So now we can select layer 2, hold down Shift, and click on layer 3 to select both layers. Press Command D or Control D on Windows to duplicate, and just to keep things more organized, let's click on layer 4 and drag it up above layer 3, so now we have these layers right next to each other. Now I want you to draw your eyes over to the right, to the parent column. Notice when we duplicated things, After Effects was really slick and smart in knowing that, hey, with this duplicate, I probably want this logo animation to follow this new layer 3. So now we have 2 things that are exactly the same. What I need to do is swap in new footage for this green pre-comp. To do that, I'll click down below all these layers to deselect, and then I'll select layer 3. Now I can go to the pre-comps folder in my project panel, and in here I have a purple pre-comp. Similar footage, just stylized purple. So notice this is 1280 by 720, and as luck would have it, the layer that I currently have, the green pre-comp, is also 1280 by 720. So I can hold down Option or Alt on Windows and click and drag on that comp. And when we drag it down and let go, it's automatically going to swap things out. Now you can swap things with different sizes. I've just noticed when you're positioning layers, it really helps to keep things the same size when you're swapping them out. So now all we have to do is position this purple layer off to the side of the box. So to do that, I want to start by moving the anchor point. See how the anchor point is here in the center? I want it to be off on the side here. So when I rotate, it actually rotates around the left side. So let's press A to open up the anchor point. And I'll go ahead and click once on the x-axis and change that from 640 to 0. And notice now the layer is shifted over to the right, which is perfect, but it's not far enough right yet. So let's go ahead and press P to open its position. And since we have a 1280 by 720 comp, I can go ahead and just change my X parameter to 1280. And you guessed it, when I press enter, now it is perfectly positioned off on the right side of my comp. So in order to bend this around in 3D space, all I need to do is press R to open the rotation. So let's click and drag on the Y rotation, and we'll drag it to the left so that it rotates back away from the camera, and we want it to actually go to -90. Now, in order to see this, I'm going to add a camera into the scene, and you'll see exactly what we've created. I'll go ahead and collapse layer 3. Let's go up under Layer and choose New Camera. And for this camera, I want to make sure to choose a 2-node camera. We can leave the 50mm preset and click OK. Let's move this camera all the way to the top of the layer hierarchy, just because I like to organize things that way. And we'll press P to open up the position. And let's click and drag to scrub on the Z. And you notice now I'm moving further away from everything. But if I scrub on the X-axis, notice now it's actually going to kind of orbit the box around. So that looks pretty cool. If I really want to change how things are oriented, I can press A to open the point of interest. And here I could bring the point of interest back towards the center. And so now you can see I've got these two layers positioned in 3D space. Now, you might think that's cool, but the real fun begins when you actually scrub your current time indicator, because if you notice, now when I play this, I have both those logos flying in, and they're actually flying in relation to each one of these different walls. So you've successfully positioned these elements in 3D space, and since you parented the logo animation to the parent layer, before you position things, the child layer followed along with its animation.